a boxing betting expert.
I know, David.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
He really gets into the nitty-gritty of this whole thing.
Liam, thanks for joining me.
No, good. Thanks for having me, mate. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so enjoyed following you. Love the stuff you're doing with Sam and Jay. I know you've got your own podcast. You appear on loads of other podcasts. So delighted to have you on here. I think you've got a lot of similarities in how I see the fight game, but you've got your own unique style as well. So let's get into it. So how did you start getting into boxing? Like, do you have a first fight that sticks out?
So yeah, it's an interesting one. So my path into boxing, never had family members involved in boxing. It's not come to me through family. It's just a sport. You know, Sky Sports News back in the early 2000s was the propaganda machine. Unfortunately, it's not the machine it once was in 2025, which is a crying shame. But it was always on the TV, and I'd always look at, boxing, right? Got into it, and I think it was around the time David Haye was fighting Macronelli, and then he moved up to heavyweight, didn't he? And he fought Valuev. And Valuev was the first pay-per-view I managed to convince my parents to let me buy, because it was Germany. It was 2009, 2010 time, and that was the first pay-per-view I stayed up for. So I had an interest in boxing, but watching David Haye as I was 10, 11 years old, take on this 7-foot Russian monster, I brought into how they were trying to sell the fight. It was David versus Goliath, wasn't it? So it's sort of come from there, and then over the years, mate, it's just grown and grown. I mean, my weekends, if I can fit it around being able to stay up to watch the fights in America, then I do it. Or if I've got to watch it the next morning because of commitments, then I do that. But yeah, just a massive love for it, mate. Doesn't matter if it's the York Hall card or undisputed heavyweight championship. I'm all over it. Enjoy all levels of fights.
And so did you, I remember that fight fondly, David Haye against Valuev. And did you enjoy the rest of David Haye's career on the back of that? Is it because he was sort of instrumental in your journey of boxing? Did you support him all the way through?
Sorry, mate. So David Haye was sort of the start point, and then I went back through looking at boxing. So one of my idols, as we'll come on to a bit later on, is Muhammad Ali. Absolutely love him. His quotes, his fights, everything he stood for with what he did, not going to Vietnam and stuff. Big fan of all of that. So I've got a lot of love for him. And sort of starting with David Haye, and I'd done some digging. So I knew of Ricky Hatton, had gone back and watched his fight against Costa Tszyu and Floyd Mayweather and stuff. So found a big love for Ricky Hatton. Then it was Joe Calzaghe, Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank, all of that. So going back through the history. But I think it was because that fight was obviously the Sky propaganda machine built up Haye Valuev to be massive, didn't they? And that's sort of what got my focus. And then it's just gone from there.
Well, and then obviously Sky fell out with David Haye massively for his comments about the Audley Harrison fight.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
They've been doing the rounds as well recently. So it wasn't a family member. It was more like sort of the media getting you into it, which is great. And I think you're a rugby. Were you a rugby player? So have you boxed as well?
Yeah, no, so never boxed. So rugby was my first love. Started playing when I was 4. Played in London, which is where I'm from originally. Played out in New Zealand when I lived out there, and then up in Essex till I haven't played since I was 21. I'm 27 in a couple of weeks. So it's been a few years since I played now, but I'm a rugby referee. I'm a rugby coach. So rugby's always been the main passion, but I'd say boxing's always been second. I'd probably say boxing is close to coming number 1 these days, but that's because of what I've been involved in doing since last summer, since getting involved with the YouTube side of things and everything else. It's obviously grown the passion and the fire even more for the sport.
Sure. So have you done any boxing training? So do you have do you think it affects the way you assess the fights? I think you're pretty good at picking results.
It's an interesting one because I can completely understand the argument of, well, you've never been in there for a fight, so how can you have an opinion? How can you pick? But I think the reality is when I study boxing. So if you listen, Jay, when I done a show with him yesterday, described me as the boxing oracle, and my knowledge for retaining information in rugby, in football, in boxing, mixed martial arts is quite high. So I feel like the way I've studied the game and the way I look at things has allowed me to have my own perspective, and my opinions are respected. I've only been doing this since the summer, but I'm getting opportunities like this, getting to come on and share my passion and my love. So I feel like just because you haven't done something, if you study it hard enough and put enough effort into learning, then you're as good as anyone else. Just because you haven't had a 20-year fight career or something doesn't make any difference. Some of the ex-professionals don't get to do media because their opinions are not skewed with how people see things. So it doesn't matter to me, no.
I think that's a really good point. I think someone said something similar the other day to me about you may have had like a few dozen fights at a high level, but if there's someone else who's watched 4,000 fights for, going back for decades, who has the right to have the stronger opinion there? I know who I'd choose. So it's interesting that David Haye got you into the sport. Then you went back a few years to look at sort of Hatton, Calzaghe, all these guys. Is there someone who's been like your favorite as you've watched it live?
So obviously David Haye was around 2010, but I'll be honest, after the Valley fight, he beat up John Ruiz, and after the Harrison debacle, I kind of was, and especially after he used his pinky toe as an excuse against Klitschko, I was kind of fed up with him. And then 2012 Olympics happens, and Anthony Joshua came in at the right time, and Matchroom's resurgence kind of got me back in. So Kevin Mitchell, Anthony Croller, John Murray, Martin Murray, all of that sort of generation kept me invested in it. Favorite fighter through the years. So if I go back, so Anthony Joshua was a big favorite of mine. Enjoyed Billy Joe Saunders. Controversial again for what he says, but his masterclass out in Quebec against David Lemieux is one of my favorite fights of all time. That 12-round performance where he just completely schooled him will always go down as one of my favorite fights.
Not many people expected that,
Yeah, American-wise, Floyd Mayweather, more pretty boy than money. I think by the end of his career, we knew what he was doing, stuff like that. But his rise up, how he done it, how he cleared up 7 divisions, everything like that was high. Always admired Manny Pacquiao, felt like he's done the right things.
So Liam, talk to me a bit more about Mayweather, because he's not. I love Floyd Mayweather, and he hasn't got a lot of attention in the conversations I've had on here.
Look, Mayweather. So I didn't watch Mayweather Hatton live. I was too young at the time. wasn't allowed to be up before. Completely get it. But I followed that fight week as a youngster. Remember being upset that Hatton had lost when I'd heard the result as a 8-9-year-old, as any young kid would be. The Brits lost, and then as I've gone through the years, I've gone back and watched his career, and I understand why he's not everyone's cup of tea. He was very, he had a checkered private life. Shall we leave it at that? And his career, everyone knew from about 2012 onwards, once he made the move away from HBO after that famous interview with Larry Merchant, where he said, if I was 50 years younger, I'd kick your ass, and that. Everyone knew when he made that move over, he was doing what he wanted. The Pacquiao fight only ended up happening in the end, from my point of view, because Mayweather knew how much money he would make. He knew it was 6-7 years past when it should have been made, but he saw how much money it would make, so he made it. So he became more of a businessman and a fighter for me. But his skills and his talent and what he could do in a boxing ring are undeniable. 50-0 because of the McGregor fight, but 49-0 as a proper professional when he was in his pomp. It speaks for itself. He took on all comers. Okay, there's a few questionable ones in there. He went back and forth, made up Marcus Maidana a second time after that questionable decision the first time around. I understand why he's not spoken about, but for me, he had a 10-15 year career where he was untouchable. He was Mr. Las Vegas. He was the man, and he's not the best role model. I will say that for any young kids that may try and look up to him. He's not the best role model, but as a fighter, especially in his pretty boy years, it was undeniable what talent he has.
And without fail, people tuned in to watch his fights, like love him or hate him. And even if you thought his style was boring, people still tuned in to watch him.
Back in the days, when I was getting into boxing a bit more and his fights were on Sky, I'd record his fights the next morning, wake up and watch them. Like, even if you knew what the results were going to be, you would still watch his fights.
Yeah. And I had friends who weren't necessarily boxing fans that would still want to come over and watch a Mayweather fight. Crossover appeal. So what about live fights? Do you go to many live fights?
Yeah, I do, mate. So last year I'd done 8 fight nights last year, ranging from my first one was Buatsi Aziz at Wembley Arena, which was just after my birthday. That was a birthday present. And my last fight night was at York Hall. I went to Charlie Edwards, Thomas Assomba. So ticked York Hall off my bucket list last year, which has been a place I wanted to go to watch boxing for years. Managed to do it twice. Love going to a live fight. There's something about going and being in an arena. If you've not York Hall, I'm not sure if you've been, mate. York Hall is a special place. It's a fantastic place, but equally, the O2 on Joyce Chisora night last year it was a very pro Chisora crowd. Everyone knew what the fight was going to be, but it was just such an atmosphere. The buzz and the rush of being in a stadium or an arena for a fight, I absolutely love.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I used to go to York Hall like 20 years ago, and last time I went, I I think it was an Audley Harrison fight. I've seen Ricky Hatton fight at the York Hall.
Yeah, he done a few fights there, didn't he?
And there was a riot last time. It was I took a girlfriend. She'd never been to a fight before. The first one we went to was a riot. So yeah, that was the last time I went. So so what would be the best one you've seen live?
Best one I've seen live, I think, in terms of performance, is Usyk when he came over and beat AJ at Spurs. Probably, I mean, I was very fortunate to go to that fight. Day of the fight, one of my good mates calls me and says, look, I know someone that works at the Matchroom. We can get seats for tonight. I said, yeah, but if we're going to be up in the gods, I'd rather go to the pub. He went, no, we're in line with the tunnel. We're going to have, I looked at him and went, just with my partner at the time, and went, I know you've never been to boxing, but how do you fancy doing this? She went, yeah, sure, okay. When, and I had an appreciation for Usyk already, but seeing him live that night and how he dealt with the size difference and how he boxed, the best performance I've seen live was Usyk at Spurs back in 2021.
And good seats as well. Amazing.
Yeah, the seats helped, but just the appreciation for him, the way he went about his work, he can't, seeing it live is just different from watching it on a screen at home.
Yeah, nice. So do you have a favorite weight division now?
I mean, the obvious answer, of course, is the big boys and the heavyweights. But I actually think from a British perspective, it's featherweight and lightweight. Sort of where you got Nick Ball and Sam Noakes and those fighters knocking around. Yes, okay, the heavyweight division is sexy. It gets the most attention. It gets the biggest fights. But some of those lighter weight divisions, we've always done well in as Brits, haven't we? That's been where our history is, up to sort of middleweight. That's where the history lies. But at the moment, probably featherweight or lightweight, which is where Nick Ball and Sam Noakes are. They're two of my favourites at the moment.
Same. Nick Ball. I mean, he's a brilliant fighter to watch. Brilliant fighter. Okay, so what about everyone who follows boxing knows it's controversial. If you could change one rule, what would that be?
Yeah, look, you said it wrong, and a lot of people say boxing is still a very niche sport. Like, if you put it in the pecking order of this country, I'd probably put football, cricket, rugby union. I'd probably put it fourth or fifth in this country because, okay, you get the big nights where you get 96,000 at Wembley, but on the whole, you've got 150 people in leisure centres having you on the weekend watching it, and they're your diehards. That's where the niche is. Whereas even non-league football can get 300-400 people, which just shows the broader appeal of the sport. In terms of something I change, and this is also to make it easier for people to follow, it would be a unified scoring system. So by that, I mean every single governing body has their own way of scoring a fight. The British Boxing Board of Control has their own way of scoring a fight. Nevada, California, they all have their own ways of scoring a fight. So that's where you get one of the lines I hate the most in boxing. Oh, it's what you like, isn't it? I cannot stand that. How about, so one of my other loves is mixed martial arts. There's a unified scoring system in MMA. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. You could watch a fight in Ipswich or you could watch it in Singapore. It doesn't matter. The judges are scored the same way. So a unified boxing system, scoring system is where I go.
Why do you think different organisations have different? Because you've got the four pillars of how to judge a fight.
Yeah, I think I understand why you can look at it. So some people like aggression. Some people like people who are boxers. They soak up pressure and then they get their work off. But yes, there's many ways to win a fight. But if it was under a unified scoring system where you incorporate it all, so you reward pressure, damage, work rate, etc., you'd get the same results. And a lot of the scorecards we see that are controversial, it's then easier to go, Mr. Judge, you need to come in and have a conversation with us about how you scored the fight because that doesn't align with X, Y, and Z. Whereas at the moment, for me, there's no accountability because it's everyone's sort of, it's what you like. So Steve Gray, the British judge, he apparently imagines he's got two glasses of water in front of him and he tips between the two, which is ludicrous that that's how a judge actually sits there and scores a fight. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like you've got an interest in MMA as well, because I think because MMA has grown so much in the last 10, 20 years, and that is all out aggression. I think that's filtered through to boxing. And so, yeah, I agree with you. It's what you like. I mean, no, it's not. And I think the aggression thing you now have in boxing, people reward aggression, whether it's effective or not. And that's a very key differential. If you're watching a boxing match, is that aggression winning you points or not? And too many people the other expression is he was the aggressor the whole fight. That's not enough. It's got to be effective aggression.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the confusion comes from. Because you're as a fan, I sat, where was I? I was at Crystal Palace for Billum Smith and Reactor in the summer last year. And on the undercard, Jack Massey beat Isaac Chamberlain.
Yeah.
I gave Massey the fight because his work was more effective. But I had someone sitting behind me who I overheard say, "Oh, I gave that to Chamberlain comfortably because he was more aggressive." But again, it comes back to that. The reality is just because the fighter's on the front foot, it's catching arms, it's catching gloves. That doesn't win a fight, but judges score it. And that's why we see robbery is another overused word in boxing. So I won't use the word robbery, but that's why we see so many questionable scorecards, because judges, you got a judge who loves aggression. So all you got to do is be on the front foot all fight, and he or she is going to score it for you. But it needs to be conformed and brought together, because it's a stain on boxing is probably the right way to say it. Because how many times do you get a big fight where it's controversial because of the scorecards, and it always comes back to, oh, they're doing it under these rules instead of, which is different to what they usually do because it's not all conformed together.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's definitely true that watching a fight live at the venue, you can get an entirely different impression than you do when you're watching it on TV. I've definitely experienced that many times. Yeah,
so I'll go to a stadium, arena, watch a fight, and then the next day I'll go back and watch it on TV just to see if what I've seen and how I fought on the night was the same. And I'll happily admit a couple of times how I scored a fight on the night in the arena completely different on TV. But it's perspective, it's opinion. It's very different being there live and in the moment compared to focused on the TV screen.
So 2024 was stellar. What was your standout fight for 2024, and what are you looking forward to most in 2025?
Standout fight for 2024. Two come to mind. Dubois dismantling AJ, sort of handing over the torch at Wembley. That was being there as well, so there's a bit of bias in it, but that was amazing. On a British level, Dubois has come back and proven everyone wrong from where he was after Joyce, from where he was after Usyk, and excited to see what he does this year. But I've just mentioned Usyk. You can't look past Alexander Usyk, can you? I mean, the man is... The fact that there's even a conversation about where he fits in with the all-time greats, he's there for me. Cleaned up at cruiserweight, cleaned up at heavyweight, giving away a 50, 60 pound weight advantage every single time. Absolute legend, love it. In the lighter weight divisions, Junto Nakatani knocking out absolutely everyone over in Japan.
Okay.
At the lighter weights, where you don't always see knockouts, incredible. A lot of time for it, and you can't look past the little monster. Naoya Inoue is, again, another generational talent, and he's had another stellar year. Excited to see what he does. And, well, he's got Sam Goodman in 2 weeks' time. Excited to see what fights we get from him after that. Will he go in with MJ Akhmalaev? Will he go in with Nakatani? I'm not sure which way he's going to go, but it's intriguing, isn't it?
Yeah, so what else in 2025 has caught your eye?
2025. Looking forward to the Bivol Beterbiev rematch in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
Interested to see what happens with Moses Atauma. You can't go backwards now. He's just knocked out. Okay, Dempsey McKean was an incredibly padded record before he had his final eliminator, but the optics are now, and a former IBF fight number 2 final eliminator challenger, you've just stopped inside 3 minutes. Can't bring him back to York Hall and give him a few coming out parties now. You only move forward. So I was at Moses Atauma's debut. I've been fortunate enough to be at three of his fights, and there's just a buzz about him. There's just a vibe there, and he's so excited to see where he goes. I think British and Commonwealth level will bypass for him now. I think he probably moves towards European fringe world levels, me being honest. But you can't, he's 20 in a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but you can't go backwards with him now. He's put himself in that shop window. You can only move forwards. Intrigued.
Just on that, his matchmaking is going to be fascinating. Like, who do you give him next?
That's the question. I mean, Filip Hrgović intrigues me because Filip Hrgović took until the final minute of the 12th round to get rid of Dempsey McKean.
Yeah.
Atauma done it in under 3 minutes. So if Hrgović wants to fight again, we don't know. Yeah. That's a good one for him. The loser of Dubois or Parker, I'm not saying he's going to win that fight, but that's the sort of level we're talking about. You've got to be at that level now.
But I think Hrgović and either of those two, that's a huge step up. I would love to see those fights made, but I think that's too soon. If they do that, it will be ballsy.
It will be ballsy, but they've set a ballsy course for him this year. They've set that ballsy course now. So he's well ranked with the WBO and the WBA. I think he's top 3 with both of them.
Yeah.
You're not going to maintain top 3 rankings by now going back down to 8 rounders, are you? So they've got to stay on a ballsy course.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me to see him in with someone like Frank Sanchez, Junior Farr, someone on that fringe level as well, but they're ranked.
Yeah.
You know, that's where he's at. And yes, it's ballsy and he may come up short, but they set the course now. They've got to stay on it. They've got to run with it. Can't go backwards.
He's crazy excited. Like the speed, everything about him is phenomenal. It's very exciting.
Yeah,
so
very exciting.
What about, give me one of your best, I want to like big you up and calm you down. So I want your best hot take that you've had when you've picked a result and also when you've just got it completely wrong.
What completely wrong? I was confident that AJ would get rid of Dubois inside 4 rounds. I got that completely wrong, and I hold my hands up to that. I was very confident on that. For you know, the frailties we've seen from Dubois in the past would be exposed by AJ, and didn't see a way that Dubois would be able to deal with AJ's power. And I mean, he took his biggest shot just as he sparked out Anthony Joshua. So got that completely wrong. Probably my best take. I was quite confident in Sam Noakes doing what he'd done to Liam Walsh. I know you say, Liam Walsh 38, but a lot of people before that fight were saying, well, Liam Walsh has never been stopped before, so hasn't been stopped. He iced Reece Moulding around. You know, Sam Noakes, he's going to cause him problems. But I was very confident from that fight being made that it was going to be a 12-round domination. I fancied Noakes to get the stoppage towards the end of the fight. That didn't come off, but how I sort of played the fight out is what happens. And away from fights, one of my hot takes at the moment is Opetaya to unify at cruiserweight and then go up to heavyweight and win belts up there as well. Look, he looks well set for cruiserweight, phenomenal performance yesterday morning, but for me, he's special and he's sort of going to follow an Usyk route and do the same at heavyweight, I believe.
I a fantasy matchup is seeing him fight Moses Atamu in 2027. Down the line, we're going to get that, and you know that's going to be a cracker. Okay, so who do you think is the most overrated boxer, either historically or active?
I mean, overrated, you can look at people like Adrian Broner. Adrian Broner was all hype. He's sold as a 4-time world champion, but they were all regular world titles. And when he stepped up the first time against Marcus Maidana, I remember watching that fight against Maidana when Maidana exposed him. So that's my pick there, Adrian Broner. Just a loud mouth, brash American that never really had it about him.
About billions. Is he still active?
He fought last year and lost. So I reckon if that was the start of a comeback, it was on a Dom King card. So 1, he's probably still waiting to get paid. And 2, he's probably never going to fight again. So I think that's the way that's going now. Okay.
Yeah, good shout. You know, you've got Usyk. You've talked about how popular he is. And then you've got at the other end of the scale, it's Broner. I don't think anyone really supports that guy. No. What about who would you have the most underrated historically or active?
Oh, on a British level, I mean, Joe Calzaghe, underrated and still underrated in retirement. I mean, 46-0, hands that would break just from, you know, pushing a door open too hard, but he found a way to get in there. And when he was challenged against Jeff Lacey, against Mikkel Kessler, against Hopkins, Roy Jones, etc., he always stepped up. He always found a way. He wasn't able to spar properly. The last 5 years of his career, he couldn't spar. He could barely do pad work. He had to get himself into condition and then see on the night if his hands would hold out. And on a British and world stage, he was always underappreciated. And he's not mentioned. For me, he's top 5 greatest British boxers of all time now, but he doesn't get spoken about enough in that conversation just because, I don't know if it's because he's Welsh, perhaps, and that's not me, you know, or people look at it and didn't like his style, but 46-0, it's similar to the Mayweather conversation earlier. You don't get to those kind of numbers if you're not a good fighter. And Calzaghe could do it all. He could stop people. He could box them. He could break them down for 12 rounds, a la the Jeff Lacey fight. And really, really underrated fighter for me.
Yeah, agree. Okay, so who do you have as the best heavyweight of all time? And if it isn't Mike Tyson, where would you put Mike Tyson in that list?
Look, greatest of all time in boxing, full stop's an interesting one. But in the heavyweight division, for me, is even more interesting because through the generations, we've seen different type of styles. So for some people, it's one of the Klitschko brothers. For me, it would be Vladimir Klitschko, but it was a very boring style. Didn't get all the stoppages. For other people, it will be Mike Tyson because he had that wrecking ball style. In more recent times, you got Usyk. Some people still put Fury up there, even though he's lost to Usyk. I don't personally. So it's a very fluid thing because the heavyweight division, more than any other, evolves with each generation. The fighters get bigger. They have, modern evolution and stuff like that, but it takes more of an effect in the heavyweight division. So if I'm going to go all time, despite me saying it was a boring style, I probably would lean towards Klitschko, but then I put Lennox Lewis or Evander Holyfield in the conversation. So I'm in and around that ballpark. But in terms of Tyson, he's in the top 5.
Yeah.
I mean, the issue with Mike Tyson, and of course, some people watching this will think, what, that dude that done an interview with his backside out and then didn't do much against Jake Paul last year. But the reality is, Tyson fought on, when he lost to people like Danny Williams, etc., he was already 5-6 years removed from his prime. His legacy is tarnished by how long he carried on for. And that's another interesting conversation in boxing, just on a tangent quickly. Fighters that don't have the right people around them to tell them when to stop. That's the sad thing. And Tyson never had the right people around him. He had people like Frank Warren. He brought him over to the UK to do a tour, but that wasn't with his best interests at heart. That was about milking the money out of him. Frank Warren then, 4 years later, was happy to send Danny Williams over to Oklahoma on a Don King card to beat Mike Tyson because he knew that was, a smash and grab cash opportunity. So Tyson was in the top 5 and would probably be higher for me if he stopped, after Lennox Lewis, if that was at the end for him. I'd have him higher up than where he actually has ended up being, but that's because he carried on for too long.
It's interesting that the going on too long thing is so common in boxing, and I think the common theme between Lennox and Calzaghe that gets them a lot of respect in all these conversations, they are highly, highly thought of. They got out at the right time, both of them.
Knew when to walk away, knew when to stop.
And for some reason, that there was no tarnishing of legacy if you get out at that time. But the flip side of the tarnishing legacy thing for me is Roy Jones, like one of my 5 favorite fighters of all time. Now, you could argue he tarnished his legacy for the defeats he suffered late on, but that doesn't affect it to me. He's still one of my favorites for what he did before that.
Roy Jones is an interesting one. So Tyson obviously had his reign, and then for personal reasons, he went off. And then when he came back, he tried to rediscover it, but it was never there. So if you actually look at the Mike Tyson heyday, if that makes sense, I'd say by the time he was 23, 24, his heyday was gone, if that makes sense. And then his best years were wasted being in prison. But that's the reality. Whereas Roy Jones had 8, 9, 10 years of being at the top of his game, or taking risks of beating people, or finding ways to come back from setbacks. Yes, he went on for too long in the end. And I mean, his last fight, I think, was out in Russia, wasn't it? Back in 2013, 2014. And by then, his magic was gone, but he just couldn't leave it behind. But he had longer at the top of his game. So it's a lot easier to respect Roy Jones and put him higher. If Tyson didn't end up in prison, I mean, if Mutson maybe he's making mugs out of people in life, but if Tyson didn't end up in prison and had another 3-4 years, say 22 to 26, he was still active and fighting, then he'd be higher up. But it's about how long you do your body of work for.
I think there's an argument to be had that if Mike Tyson was not imprisoned during that period, he may have suffered 3 more defeats, and then it would be an entirely different discussion.
Very true, but I also believe Mike Tyson would have come back possibly and done sort of similar to Roy Jones. Roy Jones came back from setbacks, didn't he? He never allowed a setback to define him. He's always, right, I either get that back or how can I reinvent myself? And he always done it. I think Tyson had that in him. He showed enough times that he was able to try again and always willing to try. So we'll never know. And that's the best thing about this conversation. Everyone's got opinions and everyone's entitled to them, but you can never know definitively because we lost those best years for Tyson.
So what do you think of what's the worst piece of sportsmanship you've ever seen in the sport?
Oh, I mean, first one that's come to me when you said that is Chizora's whole attitude in the Klitschko fight week. So from slapping Tully in the face at the weigh-in to spitting the water in Vladimir's face as the Ukrainian anthem's playing before the fight, to the roll around with David Hay where Hay ends up glassing Adam Booth at the post-fight press conference. So that's high up for me because that's not sportsmanship. That's disrespecting a whole promotion, a whole WBC, so a whole governing body that's doing that. Was it Andre Durrell's trainer or father that sucker punched his opponent in recent years after a fight? That's up there. But yeah, I think for me, it's hard to look past that Chisora fight week because it wasn't just one thing. It was an entire stage of things that ended up with him being detained at the airport for the fight with Hayes. So
It's a great shout.
That one.
I'd forgotten about that. And yeah, spitting in his face, all that stuff. Yeah.
All of that whole fight week, it wasn't, and arguably he gave Vitali one of his toughest fights at that part of his career. Vitali couldn't get him out of there, and I think it was 116, 112 on all the scorecards. That's as close as anyone got to Vitali Klitschko at that stage of his career.
You forget about that.
Just a shame everything else that came with it.
You forget about that version of Chisora because he's so sort of like, he's a cult figure now. He's so popular. But yeah, that was a bad look. So when you're assessing the fights, either in your like pre-fight previews looking for who's going to win, or when you're scoring a fight live, do you do anything that you think is different, unique? I mean, it's an obvious thing to say. Pre-fight, always try and block out noise, if that makes sense. So when I'm doing researching before a fight, I'll go look at fighters' box rec. I'll look at their own stuff they're putting out, and I'll try and stay away from the propaganda machines of their promoters or their trainers, etc., just so I can form a unbiased opinion, especially if it's fighters I'm not as up to date or abreast with. So, for example, Several Matisse, Liam Parrow last year, didn't know a lot of, knew Parrow had a good record, didn't know a lot about him, but I'd done some good digging just into him on his record, not listening to, I'm going over there and going to win. So I try and form an unbiased opinion without getting sucked in. When I'm scoring a fight, I mean, more often than not, when I'm scoring a fight, I'm going to watch along with the boys now, and that's an art in itself to be able to talk about a fight and score it. It's something I'd like to think I'm still learning on, but doing well. But if I am watching a fight without doing that, no sound on, I don't like being influenced by commentators. So I'll sit there without the sound on, and then it's trust in the eyes, which is also a good mental thing as well. But it's trust in the eyes rather than listening and hearing other people's opinions. So yeah, just being strong enough to form my own opinions and never backing down from if I have an opinion that isn't being agreed with by the lads or by other people, being strong enough in my convictions to stick with it. Look, I may end up with egg on my face, but that's not an issue. It's just being strong enough in your own convictions and not weak-minded, I guess, enough to just be swayed with the crowd. You've got to make yourself stand out, even if you look like an idiot sometimes. Liam, spot on. I think both of those things are true. The pre-fight analysis, ignore all the noises you hear, but there's so much promotion, there's so much hype, there's so much agenda, live scoring. There's always a narrative from the broadcaster. If you can't tune out from both of those things, there's going to be a problem with getting it right. So do you have boxing's great for sound bites? Do you have a favorite quote from any fighters over the years?
So I've got two. One is a Muhammad Ali quote, unsurprisingly, but I'm so fast that last night I turned the light off in my hotel room and I was in bed before the room was even dark. I absolutely love that, just the whole process of that. And then another one, I can't remember who this is by, but it's not the size of a man, but the size of the heart that matters. And then I think about that, and you look at Usyk. So 52 pounds weight difference in that fight on the 21st of December. A lesser fighter would think, I'm screwed here, I've not got a chance. But the size of his heart, the size of his cojones is what gets him through it. And that's massive for me.
Yeah, brilliant. That Ali one is classic. And that, the size of the man, that's an old school one as well, I think, from one of the legends.
I want to say it's Holyfield or someone of that generation, I want to say.
I went back even further. Okay, cool. And what about, do you have either a favorite boxing film, a favorite boxing book, or a podcast that isn't one of your own that you would recommend?
Podcast, Fight Disciples. They were before I got involved, I was all over them. I discovered them back in, I think 2021 was the first time I listened to them, and across boxing and MMA. I love their takes. They're not afraid of treading on people's toes. We know they were involved with the Zone, but they lost that deal because of some of their comments and stuff like that. I've always liked their unfair, they're unbiased. They're not afraid to cut through the BS of boxing. You know, they call for bin the belts, which is something I back. You know, they're calling for a unified Uncle Turkey Super Fight League. All of those things that we want to see as fans, they're not afraid to say, even though Adam's got his deal on TalkSport and Nick works with TNT and Unibet and stuff. They're not afraid to still be different. In terms of the films, I mean, the obvious ones are the Rocky films. Love the Rocky films, but I wouldn't say I've got a favourite fight film. I mean, for different reasons, $1 Million Baby, which was Clint Eastwood, I mean, that looked at a very, very niche and very sad topic, but actually the way that was done and the way it brings awareness to it was fantastic. So, I mean, it's not one I sit and watch often because it's an emotional film, but the way it covers the topic, fantastic. And that's, you know, one, I think that's a vital lesson for all young fighters. You know, not saying they should be made to sit and watch the film, but that's just something to bring them to, because it shows the dangers of what can happen in this game. So protecting and future-proofing yourself, because you never know how a fight's going to play down, is always important.
Yeah, nice one. Okay. So what about the best goosebump moment, either when the referee is giving the ring announcements or the best ring entrance that you can think of?
So I'll go live and on TV. Live, the goosebumps I felt inside Tottenham Hotspur Stadium before Joshua Usyk were on another level. I think it's because that was one of the first big events back from COVID as well. Wasn't expecting to be there, and I was there in that stadium watching, one, Anthony Joshua, who's one of my favourite fighters, and two, Usyk, who's a pound-for-pound legend. The feeling I felt at that point with one of my best mates was on another level, and something I can't replicate since on TV. Sitting here before the first Fury Usyk fight back in May, that was a feeling just incredible. But going, away from the big ones, I think the first time, so I went to York Hall for Sam Noakes and Gianluca Sigula back in September. Went to that, and just the first time I walked into York Hall, and the heat hits you straight away, and then you look at this old school balcony and then how small the ring is and everything like that. That was just a wow moment, and I think I had that all night. It wasn't the greatest fight card in the world. I'm not saying it was a well-beaten fight card, but just being inside that historic venue just had me on goose pimples, and it's kind of like a wow moment all night was that.
And, is it still, so I've not been to York over 20 years, but you still feel like you've done about 12 rounds just getting to that bar? Is it still like that?
Yeah, still like that, mate. And then you're not allowed to take your drinks back to your seats, so it's kind of like don't let you take the drinks to the seats. So it's kind of, I've been there twice last year, and I only went to the bar once because I was there for the fight. So they put a massive screen across it now, so you're not allowed. But you still feel like you're doing a bit of a workout to get to the bar.
Yeah.
Massive pillars in the way, and it's quite a small, tight space.
Oh yeah,
it's very, very special place.
It was always kicking off, and also like there would be fights there when I was there, and you'd see like these bar fights, and normally when you see a fight in the street, it's windmills and all this stuff. At York Hall, when the fights, it's like they have proper form. It's like these guys are actually fighters having a brawl, different ball game.
Yeah, I mean, I watched when I was there for Charlie Edwards and Thomas Asomba. I watched Prince Patel got kicked out by security and then beaten up. I mean, set upon. So he came for Sonny Edwards, and he's come up to ringside, and I'm up on the balcony, and I'm looking at it, and I'm going, sure, that's Prince Patel. And all of a sudden, there's a fight going on in the ring. All of a sudden, this starts, and then it takes 6 security to get Prince Patel. I had to pick him up. He's kicking and screaming, and then apparently he got set up on outside as well, which wasn't, don't condone it at all. But that was one of those. I looked at that and thought if Sonny does decide to jump over this fence, because he was on the ringside bit, I thought that would be tasty. But security got him out of there quite quickly.
It's such a sort of small venue that when I was there, it was Herbie Hyde started throwing chairs around. Yeah. He was always like kicking off, and so okay, that's brilliant. What about we got a huge bill in about a month's time, so if you can give me more if you want, but if you've got one standout pick that you're prepared to give me for the 22nd of February Riyadh card, what would it be?
I'll give you 2. So Joseph Parker to beat Daniel Dubois.
Wow. Okay.
I'm very high on Parker. Always loved him, and I've given Dubois his props on this, and I think he's on a journey at the moment. But I think this version of Joseph Parker with Andy Lee that's beaten Zhang, that's beaten Wilder, is as close to unstoppable as we're possibly ever going to see him. He became world champion too soon for me when he beat Ruiz back in 2015. I mean, he benefited from all the belt fragmenting in the same way AJ did, but he was also too young, too quick. So too young, too early for him, and he's probably the best version of himself now, which to think when he got stopped by Joe Joyce, if you said Joyce is going to be in the doldrums and Parker's going to be up, you would have expected it to be the other way around. But that really hot on him and Andy Lee, and I think that's a great partnership. And another one, and this is very out there, Floyd Schofield to beat Shakur Stevenson.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just Shakur's has injuries, he's had issues, he's moved promoters, we're not sure where his head's at. Floyd Schofield's putting in performance after performance, and you always get one in those Riyadh season cards, don't you? That's a massive, massive shock, right. And I think that could be the one on February 22nd.
Liam, that's awesome. Those are both big upsets. So I have written a note of that. If that happens, I'm giving you a call straight after to pat you on the back. Yeah, good shouts. Liam, look, brilliant. That's 40 minutes we've done. It's felt like 10 minutes, but brilliant. And what I like is in in that chat, you've got some very individual thought. Like there's a lot of stuff I've agreed with you on, and it's great. It's always nice when you hear similar opinions. But I like the way you do have your own. You've surprised me with a few answers there. So brilliant. Really enjoyed that.
Really enjoyed it. Something different for me doing something like this. I mean, like I said, when I first I went on Steve Talks Boxing last July before Chisora and Joyce, and first time I'd ever done anything like it. And then was chatting to Sam in the DMs, and he said to me that weekend, "Oh, do you want to come on and do a review for Joyce Chisora?" And it was Leon Edwards, Bilal Muhammad in the UFC that weekend. Do you want to do that? Met him and Jay, and now we're doing our own thing. And yeah, it's never something wasn't on my 2024 bingo card, definitely, but it's something I've loved doing and really enjoying carrying on with it this year.
Well, look, Liam, I said it at the start, but what you guys do is brilliant. I tuned into your Opataya walk. I mean, that was I was suffering remotely with that KO. Like your reaction, I was like, oh no, what's happened here? And you present it across the screen brilliantly. All three of you are great. So good luck with that. Give us so just say what it is again, so everyone can look it up.
So my show is Liam's Fight Night Picks over on the STBX YouTube channel. And then I'm a co-host of the No Punches Pulled podcast on SW Fight Hub over on YouTube. And we do pre-fight predictions, watch-alongs, review shows. I'm on there 4 nights a week usually is how that works. You'll catch us live very regularly on there. And
what is your handle on X?
My handle on X is what it says on the screen. So it's at Liam_Tully9. That's where you find me. I'm looking to grow it this year. Boxing Opinion, turn it more into a fight sports page. But yeah, all the interactions, all the follows definitely helps. I really appreciate it all.
Brilliant. All right, Liam. Really enjoyed that. We'll wrap it up now. And have a great day. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Cheers, mate. Thank you.
See you, Liam.